I'm here today with Marian Dunlea. I'm so excited to get to chat with her about her work on body dreaming. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Lex. It's a great privilege to be with you for the conversation.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys a little bit about her background. Marian is a Jungian analyst and somatics practitioner and leads workshops internationally integrating body and soul work. She is head of training in Body Soul Europe, part of Marion Woodman Foundation. Her background includes Jungian analyst, psychoanalytic psychotherapist, psychosynthesis psychotherapist, infant observation supervisor, and somatic experiencing practitioner. Her book, Body Dreaming and the Treatment of Developmental Trauma, is out on Routledge, won the National Association for the Advancement of Psychoanalysis Gradiva Award for the Best Book, and is co-winner for the International Association for Jungian Studies, IAJS Best Book 2020. So this is what the book looks like. It's absolutely beautiful. I loved it. I love the pearl on the front and how that comes into the work. Such a beautiful metaphor, which hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit about. You use also another metaphor in the book, New Grange, right?
New Grange, we say here, yeah. Bruna Boine is the Gaelic for it, yeah.
Yeah, that was beautiful. So to get started, though, I was really initially turned on to your work through Marion Woodman and the Marion Woodman Foundation. So I'm really interested in your relationship with Marion and the impact she's had on your work.
Great. Well, it gives me great pleasure to speak about Marion and Marion's work and the work that she then developed with Mary Hamilton and Anne Skinner in the Body Soul Rhythms program. But so I guess my first introduction to Marion was when I used to travel on the tube in London for about an hour, sitting underground with Addiction to Perfection and Pregnant Virgin when I was training in psychosynthesis. And it's not that we were really studying the program, but she wasn't on the program, but I came across her work and I was really fascinated by it. And I don't know if I understood anything about it, but I was just really enthralled. It's kind of that sort of writing. It's not that you have to understand everything. You're just taken with something here. It's like the imagination speaks to you. And I really, I saw her advertised doing a workshop at St. James's in Piccadilly, which is a lovely centre, an old church, and they use it for talks and that. And I went to hear her, and I did a couple of weekends with Marion at different times, and they were really terrific. And she was bringing in some of the body work there, and I liked it. But it was really only when Dancing in the Flames came in, I think it was 96, they launched that in Ireland. Gill and Macmillan were publishers. And Marion came over with Mary and Anne, her team. I didn't know there was any team at that point. I just thought it was Marion, and there was a launching of the book. And I said to my friends, we've got to go to this. This is really going to be exciting. This woman is amazing. Well, little did I know it was going to change my life, because it gave me time that I don't know whether it was seeing her as well in Ireland and circumstances. I was now back in Ireland. I had been living in London with my family and we'd moved back, but there was just the right timing. I loved her work, and wonderful work in the morning, and it was quite soon after Mother Teresa had died and Princess Diana, so there was a lot of metaphor she was working with. And in the afternoon then, Anne Skinner and Mary Hamilton invited us into kind of the body field and to play with the metaphors in the body through voice work and body work. And I just came out of it in another world. And on our way home in the car, we stopped and got ice cream at the petrol station. We sat at the ocean eating our ice creams. And I said, I'm going to go to California. I had a conversation with Anne Skinner and she told me about California. And at that stage, I could barely pay the mortgage. I had no idea what we were going to do, but I just knew that's the path. And a friend of mine said, it's really weird, because she said, I was there watching her and I was thinking, you're going to be teaching her work. I know you're going to be teaching her work. So it was a confirmation. And soon after that, my father, well, it was just before he passed away, but he gave us a gift of some money. And we decided that money was going to go to my heading off to the first place I went to was Pajaro Dunes on the coast. Marian and Ann used to run a workshop there, and a mask workshop. They called them intensives in those days. And I was just really thrilled to be there. And first thing we did was have a kind of a meeting with anybody who wanted to present in the morning to do the opening meditation. And Marian said, I'll meet you guys now after our evening introduction, where everybody would speak about who they were. So about 5 or 6 of us, how many ever mornings there were, gathered with Marian. And she said, well, I'll tell you the format and what happens, and what then if you'd like to present in that format, that's fine. So she talked, and she said, I'll do the first morning so you guys get an idea of what it is. And I said, well, Marian, I just have to say tomorrow is the 1st of February, and it's Imbolc, and it's the Feast of Bridget. And really, there are beautiful rituals we need to do to bring in the Bridget energy. And this lady, this crone, just looked at me like, she just stared. And then she said, okay, right, you do tomorrow morning. And it was such a blessing that somebody could put trust in me like that. And I was completely jet lagged. So, I was bold, as we say, asking the question. But I did. And it was wonderful, and it was beautifully received. And we really celebrated Bridget with some ritual at that event. And it was like I felt it was totally space to come in and meet Marian from what I was bringing, and then really open to what she was bringing with the body, dropping the whole level of the work that I'd had in my life to that point at such a deep level. And she got great pleasure out of seeing me day by day progress in my dropping, as that's the metaphor we always use, dropping into the body. Mm-hmm. She would say, now wait for tomorrow. Wait for tomorrow is the big day, And I'm like, already that day seemed huge to me, So that was my work with Marian. That was the beginning of it. And that was way back in the 90s. And I never looked back.
Wow. So did you then move into Jung after that, or were you already kind of interested in Jung before that?
Yeah, I'd already been on the program in Ireland, which was the individual membership route. We didn't have a Jungian training society, like we were what they call a development group. There wasn't enough people in the country to form a society, so we become a developing group within IAAP. And that has its own kind of map to become an analyst, which is called the individual membership route. So other countries that don't have societies as such, they also sign up for that. And then the program is a kind of, each country develops its own program with analysts who come in and teach, or you go out and you work with other analysts in other societies. And at the time, I was doing a lot of work coming over to Marian about 4 times a year. And I had also done my training as a Jungian analyst, as a psychoanalytic psychotherapist at that point, and my infant observation. And anyway, they decided that they were going to acknowledge the work that I had done with Marian as part of the training at that time. It was very unique. I don't think anybody else had their work recognized, but then I was in the individual position of being on the individual membership route. Mm-hmm. And so it combined beautifully. It was quite different. And when I came to do my thesis for Trinity, for instance, it was quite a challenge because it was a very academic course. And they, at that point, wanted to sanction the psychoanalytic training we did. And I said I wanted to bring in an embodied approach, the interconnected field of psyche and soma. And whilst I could write an academic paper, I really wanted it grounded in Marian's work, that was the core to the work. So the challenge was really mighty at the time because I knew the people reading it would not have an idea what I was talking about, dropping into the body. They wouldn't even get it, But the extraordinary thing then was synchronicity. They were celebrating the San Francisco Jung group, were celebrating Marion Woodman, and Tina had organized the speakers, Tina Stromstead at that time, and Alan Shore and Don Cowshed came. And I was excited hugely by both. I love their work, both of them, and have a great connection with them. But Alan gave me a bridge so that I could bridge Marion's work with the psychoanalytic field. And I could go back and finish my thesis and present it. That was very exciting. So that was really the beginning for me of really realizing that I just don't want to do Marion's work, that there's something that I was bringing that I had to marry the psychoanalytic with Marion's work if I was to hold my place in the roll call really of analysts in Ireland. Otherwise, I would just be considered sort of marginalized. And again, the body would be in the shadow. So I wanted to take it out of the shadow, but I needed a ground. And Alan really gave me the language of that through the neuroscience and all his research into his books on affect regulation.
Yeah, it's really amazing in reading through the book to hear finally all of that put into one place in a book, and to be able to raise Marion up in that way. I think it's just a beautiful work, and what I think everybody feels when they read Marion. So to kind of put those pieces together in such a brilliant way. I don't know if anybody has worked with Marion's work like that, like you have in this book.
I don't think so, not yet, but I mean, it's coming because I've been teaching it now for quite a number of years, and a number of the people I've taught and worked with here, and some of the graduates from our the leadership program we did, Marion Woodman leadership program that normally happens, they did it in conjunction with us in Europe. And many of those people have been through all the programs that I've brought the BodyDreaming strand to. But yeah, it was quite a challenge, and I'm so happy that I've been able to do it, you know, and people are so receptive to it right now with what's happening.
Oh, I mean, the mix of somatics, I think, and the body coming back out of the shadows is, you can feel it happening. You see it happening in other spaces lightly. I think what Woodman really intuited throughout her whole work, just mythopoetically, like the fact that we can marry it with neuroscience and that it was there all along is just, I think, you know, amazing, to say the least. But so in terms of your work and how you kind of remediate body-soul rhythms into a practice that takes place in session, in the room, I think is groundbreaking. That's something that we really need in terms of just integrating trauma, both developmental and I think at large, into depth psychology specifically. I think Carl Jung was able to do that archetypally, but this somatically is, I think it's the new way. It's the new way for me, certainly. So why don't you tell us a little bit about BodyDreaming and how body-soul rhythms inspired it?
Okay. So Lex, you can intervene as you like, just to keep me on track, and also from your own hunger, where you really want me to go. So that would be great. So I've given the background really to Marion Woodman's work and my passion for that. And then this, you know, that I had this thing of having to finish a thesis for a very academic institution on psychoanalysis. And that I decided that was the moment I was going to bring Marion Woodman into psychoanalysis. And I used Alan as the way in. So then I began to start to teach when we would do the body soul rhythm intensives. I started to really begin to translate what we were doing for people into neuroscience. So I would say this exercise that Marion and Marian Ann convened really shows us, and then I would describe what was happening in the neural pathways, what they were attempting to change, and what was happening, what the mirror neurons were doing, how the positive mother exercise that Marion would use to really bring in the love and the eros, how that was really about inner attunement. You know, later we might talk about interoception and Borges' work for that. But I was really bridging in that way for a while. And I was working with a colleague, Candice Lubert, who's since deceased. And Candice was an amazing movement and dancer, a movement teacher and dancer, and creative art therapist from Montreal. She's founder of Lambda there, Lambda, I think it's called, and a third level training for dance therapists in Montreal. But Candice's work was really very much influenced by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and Continuum's work and Susan Harper's work. And Candice introduced me to that world. And what I saw, it was like Marion's, I got another layer. It's like I got really, it slowed down. It started to really, really slow down. And for me to really see when you slow down the work, what starts to happen and how you create the relationship with your inner experience. Not only about dropping in to get expression out, but dropping in to see where the next impulse from inside is coming, and really being able to track and wait for that and feel it at a very sensorial level. So it brought me into Gendlin's work and the sensing body, the living sensing body, which I really feel is a wonderful correlate with Jung's living body. So that opened that experience of felt sense body. I mean, nowadays people talk about mindfulness, and it's very, I think it's very, related to mindfulness. But there is something through Marian that came on, which was like the eros, the relationship to one's own body, to open it to the connectivity we have with it, is respect for it and an attunement to it. And then that sensing body deepens our connection to ourselves. So I could see that from my work in psychoanalysis and early infant development work, that this was really key to attachment and healing attachment issues. If we could build that attunement, we would be building a secure base, which is what Bowlby talks about in terms of attachment. And that building the secure base is done through that interoception that we talk about from polyvagal theory, or really the sensing body, making relationship. And I do that through attunement and listening to what's happening and tracking. So that was really an opening and then a deepening, and it landed for me in the attachment and the early developmental piece. So that was really powerful, and I was able to bring that into Marion's work. But thankfully, in early, I don't know the years, no, actually I've forgotten, Peter Levine offered a training in London. It was his first training in London, and I was able to go to that. And there I got firsthand, so up to then I'd been having it sort of translated for me through my work with Candice, but now I could have it firsthand, the whole experience of learning about the nervous system. And that how our, early wiring and conditioning and our nervous system responses of fight, flight, or freeze are so conditioned from our early attachment relationships. I mean, trauma later on also affects it. So it's not just that, but it's like the fault line of our nervous system goes right down into early trauma. What happens up here has already its base in how the nervous system was formed right down at the beginning in the early relationships. So that was, again, wow moment for me. I was really excited to learn that we can actually change our nervous system responses. It's not that I didn't see it happening on the floor in the body soul work. I did. I saw incredible work happening there. But now I could see, oh my God, we've actual tools that we can go in there, instruments. We don't have to create a particular exercise on the floor in body soul conditions, intensives, and getting people going off to live somewhere for a week and all of that. We can actually, in our way of tracking with our patients and with our clients, we can tune into their nervous system response by just reading how they come into the room. And then from Levine, I learned that actually if you support the system, if you bring in the opposite to that, which is really a very old, it's from the Greeks. Heraclitus talked about the tension of opposites, holding the opposites. And then you had Spinoza, who talked about in the 14th, 15th century, that if you have an emotion that's very charged or an emotional response, then you need to treat it with its equal and opposite one, a more calculated equal and opposite approach. So I could then see that actually this is where Levine is coming from in terms of his tradition, that he is saying, if the nervous system is going like that, I've got to come outside it. I don't go after it like we often do in therapy. Tell me more about that story. What happened? Oh, and then what happened? So I'm increasing the charge of the trauma. And no, Levine says, you just leave that and you come out of it altogether. You go to what we might say, I always learned in physics, equal and opposite, So you find what's equal and opposite. And you don't have to do that with a big intellectual inquiry. You allow the eyes to wander, for instance, or you allow the imagination to bring forth an image. So there are two forks I use. Levine's one is you bring forth an image, a resource, somewhere that makes you feel good, your favorite spot, a creature you love to be with, a person who feels safe to you. So you bring in the felt sense of the body as it remembers. So then you're having a very embodied and grounded experience of something. So the trauma circuit is interrupted. The attention now of the brain is now on the physical response to the positive image that's coming through. And the body has its capacity to self-regulate when that happens. So I'm not doing something, we're just supporting the self-regulation that's already existing. In the book, I talk about Steve Hoskinson's work, who's a colleague of Levine's, and he talks about orienting response. And we have the capacity to just look around and see where our eyes have stopped. And if we follow that, we engage with it and we allow curiosity to take us into the here and now moment. And again, you can't be in trauma if you're in the here and now moment, but I'm describing what it is I'm looking at out the window this minute. If I bring my attention to it and start to describe it to you, that's where my attention is. And then there's a correspondence in the body. Because again, to use the polyvagal language, my social engagement is engaged there. And that has an immediate impact on the ventral system. So my heart rate calms, my blood pressure comes down, and I have somewhere that's not activated. So in creating something that's not activated, I have created an opposite. And even using the word I have created, what I'm really learning about is that this whole work is about participating in a self-regulation, and I like to use the capital S there from the Jung term, that's happening on our planet all the time. And all we do is we're tuning into that frequency.
Yeah, it sounds like there's what happens is a shift in their trauma response, and that is the goal, to help them learn how to re-regulate or self-regulate in the moment.
And then the idea, of course, with that is not to interrupt, to correct an emotional response, but it's to support the body so it can experience what it wants to experience. Because the hyperactivity or the switch off and dissociation or freeze is a response to the trauma, and the body hasn't been able to find a way of regulating it or coming through it. So I titrate, then, is the word that Levine says. When we have an opposite, then we can move between the two. We bring in fluidity into what's been a system that's got trapped, like somebody who tells the story and every story and lives their whole life from that racing place, or somebody who's kind of a little bit dissociated and chilled and out of it all the time is also stuck. Right. Either one, they're not choosing, they're caught in something, in a trauma response. And by creating an opposite, you begin to bring fluidity and greater coherence into the system.
Yeah, and from what I understood, that helps them widen their window of tolerance in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
When I was observing the dream work in the book, there was, there's always that point where they kind of want to shut down, or they don't want to go into the feeling.
Yeah.
And, the way that you kind of tenderly guide them along to get them to stay with it. So it's not like just trying to heal something immediately. It's really kind of getting the body, like you said, to be able to experience that and tolerate those uncomfortable feelings.
Mm-hmm. And I think making relationship to the body, earlier I talked with Marion's work, like making relationship to everybody that is in front of me, whose body is in front of me that I'm working with. I'm really tuning into how their system is operating, and I'm not confronting it. I'm sliding up beside it and checking and seeing what next. What does it need next? What am I seeing? Maybe there's an impulse there. As Levine says, trauma is often an interrupted self-protective gesture that wasn't able to happen. I wanted to do this when somebody was throwing something at me and I didn't get a chance, but I'm always talking like that, or I'm always doing this, and my life is always backing away from something. Well, I might notice that in the way that I mightn't hear that at all in the content, but as I'm watching and seeing, it may come up in the gesturing, the spontaneous gestures that come from the somatic unconscious are the threads then we pick up and we follow. And that's that's what leads us into the healing.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next question. Can you tell us a little bit more, explain a little bit deeper what the somatic unconscious is and how we can drop down into it?
So I think initially when you and I were talking there, we were talking about the shadow, and Marion was a great person for talking about the shadow in the body. What's not dealt with is buried in the body. And also she talked about that generationally. So somatic unconscious, so that was all Marion's metaphors and stories for it. She used to say a mother who's not able to hold her child has never had the holding from her mother. So the child cannot ground herself in her own nature. So when we would all come into work and work with Marion, she was talking from the place of we have to learn to ground ourselves in nature, in our nature, our physical nature, and then in nature around us. And she would talk about discovering the feminine through that. The somatic unconscious language came, in a way, more explicitly using that language, came to, for me, with the whole work around memory, and explicit and implicit memory is a very good way of describing it. I mean, Joan Chodor's work and Mary Stark's White House, the authentic movement, is also coming from that, the somatic unconscious, the same with Bonnie, all the work that's in our bodies, that only when we bring fluidity and flow do we start to get what's been buried, starts to come out and release. Well, with the Peter Levine's book, Memory and Trauma, is a lovely book. It's a very small little book, but it's really gold in terms of the somatic unconscious, because he's describing memory and how it's formed, an explicit memory, which is, takes quite a while for the part of the brain called the hippocampus to come online. From about 18 months to 3 years, it starts to come in. And then, when the kid starts to say, we did this, and then we did that, and then we did that. They love the sequential and ordering of things and all of that. So they're kind of 2.5 to 3 by the time that's really got solid. But before that, they have memory, but it's called implicit memory. And implicit memory is held in the body. So you can hold somebody in a certain way, or you go into a room and you'll pick up something and you just have the memory of it. Something will come back through a smell, through a touch, through a conversation, a piece of music. We've all kinds of ways that implicit memory can be triggered. But there's a lot in the way we respond, like I was saying, that somebody goes through life and they're kind of backing back. And that's not just a metaphor, it's their whole presentation and their way of being. It's because implicitly in the body something happened, could even be a birth trauma that pushed them back like that. So that's where that implicit memory is held in the soma, it's held in the body. And when we work with the body and we're working to get that lovely titration between trauma and the place of freedom or movement, then when that's established, what presents itself, it could be body images coming from the body work, it could be dream images, it may be sounds, it may be impulses. The person may decide they want to move, it may be they're starting to move like that, and I would say, can you slow that down? Can we just see where's that pre-movement movement? Where does that want to begin? What happens if we really, really slow that down? And very often, you'll get a beautiful movement that will continue and flow, but it will be from one of the early self-defensive movements that we all need, but that it was thwarted or cut off. So the somatic unconscious there is coming to consciousness and bringing healing into something and a completion, which is, again, what Levine says is what's absolutely core to resolving trauma. And to get to that work is to get to the somatic unconscious level. You don't get that through the content of verbal speaking. You've got to really be watching and listening at that other level to see what wants to come up, what's prompting. And it can come up beautifully through image, but it's coming out of the body.
Yeah, I'm curious. I noticed that a lot of people, I don't know if it's just here in the States or if it's everywhere, but there's a really big resistance to being in that moment. They find it very uncomfortable, very tough to drop down, to lean into the images or the impulses that come up. And in the book, it's often mentioned that the body for almost everybody is the inferior function, or some part of that inferior sensing function. So how do you navigate that with your clients?
So I just kind of feel like putting it back and saying, what did you notice in the book? That's what struck you about that? I mean, what I could say is relationship, social engagement. So my social engagement, for instance, with you, like with the client, is that we're working to have this to and fro between us, and relaxation being really part of that. And when the system starts to relax, when I know there's more openness coming in, I can bring in little by little. But every time I bring something in, it's a titration, it's percentage. I can only drop in this much. But Levine would say that's all you need, because every trauma is like a fractal. It contains the entire picture of every single other trauma. So if we work with just this little tiny bit of resistance today, which I never use the word resistance, just working with what feels, where's the tension? So the tension is all in the neck today, okay? Let's be with the neck. Let's just give it the time it needs. So I give it as a whole. This is, again, for me, it's like the positive mother that Marian talks about. For me, it's just saying to the body, yeah, I can hear it, tell me about it. Okay, so the neck's really tight. So when we stay with the energy, see what happens. And sometimes it'll increase, and sometimes it won't increase. Sometimes it'll shift. And then I might feel that we need to come away from it for a while. And that's where I might intervene and say, how about we take some time now and see? And again, I would look for a resource. I might look outside and say, how about we orient outward and see where your eyes land? Let them go for a walk. It could be in the room, it can be outside the window. See if there's something, they've stopped somewhere. Where did they stop? Let's be curious. Go back and see where they stopped there. Tell me what it is you're engaged with there. And as they describe what they're seeing, already there's a calming. And so when they've calmed and I notice the system is down, I say, what do you notice, having told me all about that? And they say, well, actually, I don't feel my heart racing anymore. I'm not sweating. There's a bit of ease. And I say, okay, well, from this place, What's it like to go back to the neck, see what's happening there? Or I might just say, what do you want, when you look from this place, what's it like to go back to the dream? So if there was a part of the dream that I felt was, there was a tightness around or an activation around, I would say, from this place of openness, what's it like to look at the dream image now? And inevitably, it will have shifted because you're not looking at it from the activation. You've opened up the space around it. That window of tolerance has increased, so there's more capacity for the feeling tone and the emotion to be present. And the curiosity is awakened. And that only might last for a minute. They may see something instantly, and then they could say, I feel the tightness again. I'd say, great, just notice it. And if you need to, move out again. Or I might just say, just notice it and see what happens. And sometimes just the paying attention to it, just the receiving the body, just receiving the attention, we'll get an exhale. Or it may not work like that. I might say, well, how about we look out at that, whatever it is you were looking at again. Let's just look at it now. And then you say, and what do you see when you look at that now? And again, it will have changed. So it's like it expands and expands and expands. And from there, so it's like this lovely toing and froing and toing and froing. And for me, that really spoke to Jung's concept of the transcendent function, because we're holding opposites, but not in a rigidity. We're holding it in a movement, and out of it comes something very new, that living third that appears. And I have no idea what that's going to be, and neither does the client, but it comes out of a somatic experience. And in that, it's usually very, very powerful and can be really, really simple. It can be a somatic experience in terms of the body can fill with love and heat around the heart, or a whole new image can come in, or a memory can come that can carry such healing. Something that was very distressful to talk about in the beginning, at the end, they maybe remember that actually something did happen. My grandmother was there at that moment, or something. I'm just putting a story on it now, or a dream can follow. But the third does come from that dance of opposites. It's the waiting and the attunement. And Marion always talked about the waiting without hope. So it's not like our Beyond says, sitting without memory or desire in front of the client. So we're not pressing for, I remember they did this, we're going to get there, or I desire this. No, we just try and hold, waiting without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing. And then without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing, for clinging to something. But if we wait with faith, then she would say the faith and the hope and the love are all in the waiting. So it's just T.S. Eliot that she loved to quote to us around that. And it was really important because it always came in the workshop when there was a time like about day 4 when people were really struggling. And she knew that you had to go through this to come out the other side. Nowadays, the tension in the work is quite different because we don't go after activation in the same way. We're stepping back from it to allow the system to find its homeostasis or its fluidity, or the buzzword nowadays is coherence. So rather than going straight for it, we stand back. But in the standing back, we're opening a space, clearing a space for something to happen.
Yeah, so that kind of experience of really the most authentic version of sticking to the image, I think, and being able to bring that into the body and staying with that moment that is really the most important if it's coming up in the dream or if it's presenting as kind of a key, I think, into that unconscious. And finding that where that transcendence is being sought. or needs to happen. Can you speak more specifically to the types of dreams in the book? There's speaking to, like, certain dreams that really stand out as part of the trauma work, whether they're kind of linear or non-linear, I'm not sure, but when do you tell me a little bit about that, like how you can sense that there's specific type of dreams with specific types of figures that show up.
And it's funny, Lex, because I don't think about dreams like that. I don't think about dreams as types. Or, of course, as a Jungian, I'd be aware that this sounds like an anima figure that's here. It's like a soul figure that's coming in. But in the way I'm working right now, I really stay away from, even to use the word label is too strong, because I don't want to be kind of even giving myself that label. I just want to say that I really hear the story, and I'm always listening to know where the unconscious is leading us, because for me, it's on the deepest level of this work, it's self-regulation. And the self regulates through body and through psyche. It's the interface of the two all the time. So whatever body work I'm doing, I'll say, well, listen for your dreams. And when we work the dreams, it's always what happens in your body when you tell me that dream. Is there any part of the dream that you're connected to right now? What do you feel in response to that? What's happening? So I let the dreamer tell me what's important about the dream. And it's always just a mystery to me how the depth of the work comes from focusing in the minutiae, bringing that felt sense experience of the dream in, and allowing the body. Sometimes I'd be spending most of the time in the actual body work, and we've only heard the dream, and we've gone straight into the body work. But by the time we're coming out, everything in the dream is just starting to fit. The parts, suddenly it's like a kaleidoscope where things suddenly have a pattern and a meaning. So I don't know if that's making any sense to you. And of course, then in relation to the where the person is going in their life, of course, it'll have meaning in terms of that. But the actual work of each dream, I try again without memory and desire, just to be present in the moment to the body's experience of the dream. And it's wonderful when it happens like that, because then it can go to real great depths of meaning and interpretation and, looking at the figures that have come in, but it's always through the body.
Yeah, so going back to that third thing, I'm interested in, metaphor obviously is so important to this process and connected to working with the image. Can you explain a little bit on the neuro and the significance of metaphor and how that shows up in image work?
Well, I think the metaphor in the book, you mentioned the pearl, and then we talked about Newgrange. I think I might talk about Newgrange. So for me, metaphor, first of all, when I heard Marion talk about metaphor, well, to jump again, neuroscience, I think it's Levin and Model in their work. They say that the more brain centers light up in response to image than anything else. So metaphor, Marion would say, is an image that has body to it. It always, like, I'm sick to my stomach or something like that. That's not really, I can't think of something now, but they're always in the body. They reference the body, and they bring the emotion into the body. So they're crossing from psyche to soma and to meaning. They carry the three things. A trans metaphore means to move across. So it moves across those realms. In terms of the brain, I think it's that lighting up of the synapses that are fabulous, that there's a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere connection straight away, crossing over that corpus callosum. And when they're so potent, they're affecting that limbic brain, and they're affecting us either with a sense of heightened activity or a sense of deep calming and soothing. So their potential is amazing. for me, and I also think it's, is it Dan Siegel who talks about it in terms of they kind of connect that through the insula in the brain, that they're bringing the information from that frontal cortex right back to the reptilian brain, that it's like that line that goes through. But I would say for me, when I was working to write the book and that, and I was talking a lot, like I've mentioned, about self-regulation. I remembered one day I had gone to Zurich to write. I just needed a container that really would help me and feed me. So I felt Küsnacht, where Jung lived, was going to be the right place to be in connection with the institute there and with ISAP in Zurich. So I was, when I was there, I just had this moment one day of thinking about the solstice. We were coming up to winter solstice, and I had often in Ireland visited Newgrange or another lot of cairns, which are just called a heap of stones. They're passage graves, they would call them, or passage tombs. Nobody really knows exactly what they're for. It's surmising what they might be for, but they're beautiful megalithic art around the outside of these or inside of them. But the one at Newgrange is very particular because it's built in the shape of the woman's body. So it's like the passageway into the central chamber, then with the side chambers to there and to the back. And so not just in terms of its shape is it extraordinary, but its alignment is with the winter solstice, so that when the sun rises behind the hill opposite on the 21st of December, in the darkest day and the shortest day of the year, when the sun rises, it penetrates through a box on top of the roof, which drops the light down along the passageway. And it takes about, I can't remember what the exact timing is now, about 20 minutes or so to come up the passageway and light up the chamber inside. And inside there's a beautiful stone with the triple spiral on it. And I began to feel that this principle of alignment is so ancient, and that intuitively I'd been going for many years in the winter solstice up to one of the cairns and just being there for that moment of morning sunrise on the winter solstice, in the darkest time of the year, the coldest time of the year, frost on the road, ice, whatever. Get up in the dark. We used to go with friends and we'd climb the hill, and you didn't know when you get up to the top, who was a body or who was a stone in the darkness, and then waiting for that light to come and waiting and waiting. And it would somehow be that moment of revelation for me of light in matter, spirit in matter. It was Christmas, 3 days off Christmas. And for me, it used to feel like this is Christmas. This is the divine coming in to matter again. And I thought about this alignment principle and this metaphor for alignment, and the power of metaphor to bring us into ourself and have that ego self access, is what we call it in Jung. That deep, deep sense that I'm aligned, I'm in touch. And when I'm in touch, we know physiologically my whole system is vibrating at the same pulse rate, as it were, the pulse rate as of the universe, as the planets are orbiting the sun. There's a correlation. So I discover I'm not alone. I'm in keeping with, I'm in touch with my own self, and it brings me into such a sense of interconnectedness. So the alignment comes from an interiority, but it expands outward. That is a reciprocity and a participation that's so powerful. So for me, metaphor in some ways is such a dynamic word and force, and that each metaphor can cross so many levels. Just as I had that experience of exploring that metaphor and then discovering when I held that metaphor that every chapter in the book had a Newgrange moment of alignment. And that metaphor does that. It brings us right into ourselves in that most physical and intimate way, but also in the transcendent, that it connects us to what's around us. And for me, at the moment with COVID and everything, our feeling of interconnectedness from a positive sense, not from contagion, but a sense of how we can influence each other and bring greater harmony and coherence into the whole system is quite a challenge. And it's a challenge with everybody that we meet, but it's like it's also that faith in the capacity of the self-regulation that is happening to align with that. You know, the ancients aligned with the sun rising, and they built their cairn in expectation. In a way, when I work with that expectation that there will be alignment. And it does happen.
Yes. So, you know, even in your description of that, the phenomenon that happens at those stones and the metaphor itself, there's a sense of stillness there. I can imagine just feeling the stillness of being there, and what that, the objective of that self-regulating and that access with the ego is really to tap into that still point at the center.
Yeah.
And to help everybody find a way to do that, because that does exist and it is real and it does happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really that's the faith, you know, that I think is fundamental at the moment to all of us. No matter what, we're capable of self-regulation, no matter what. That's the extraordinary thing, whatever the catastrophe. The body seeks to self-regulate. Psyche seeks to self-regulate. And I have to align with that principle. I have to align with that, looking at the person, whatever is going on, that this is what I can hold at this moment.
Otherwise, we feel that dis-ease if we don't have access to that. And, you know, finding that in several disciplines, and then the several disciplines that are in this book that mirror and mimic, you know, the ways in which we can just use different language to describe the same process. And it's really beautiful and very much needed in depth psychology. It's there, but you know, to bring it out and headline it this way, I think, you know, it's why everybody loves Marion, and that's why she has that special magic to her, because her writing did that. Her writing brought us there, and being in her presence and, you know, working in the body this way brings us there. And that, for me, that's the point. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess maybe not everybody, but I think it is, you know, and it works. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom around these topics. I've just found it so fruitful, and I hope that everybody else does. I know they will. But it's been such a great blessing to have you.
Thank you, Lex, for having me.